So we start with centering in the heart. We do this by focusing our attention in the deepest coherence, the purest emptiness, the warmest love, and the greatest expanse, the most solid ground. It may have one of those flavors. It may somehow have all. It may feel like something I have not described. The more we focus on that which is always, on our pure, unchanging identity, on the now, outside of the constructions of time and space. We have released from the collapsed wave function that became a particle and uncollapsed the particle back into the potentiality wave function. We are going from constriction to openness and possibility. And we are not abandoning whatever it was that was needing to feel itself or to feel part of the whole, because what we are moving towards is not a limited aspect within a binary, but wholeness that is all inclusive, and that thus, due to its own intrinsic properties, embraces that which we may have originally been focused in. One metaphor is when we are stuck within a limited experience. It's like we're closed inside a room. All walls, floor, and ceiling are made of mirrors. Whatever we have enclosed in there, which is simply ourselves mirroring ourselves back to ourselves. We're doing our best to create with constantly recycled content, with a limited amount of variables, which automatically will lead to a certain level of incoherence, because we're trying to create from limited factors. We're breathing our own carbon dioxide. When we open a window or a door to the outside, all of the oxygen that we ever needed is now available. And through natural alchemy of how air moves, the room will be filled with cleanliness again. The doorway is open. So where are we standing? There is a self that's still standing in the room. There is a self that is holding the doorway open. There is a self that has always been outside. We can view the self in the room as the self that has forgotten greater experience and fully identified with current local experience. Experiencing, for example, scarcity, experiencing a limited view, experiencing a limited experience of one's own power and creative potential. Believing whatever it is that keeps getting reflected off of all of these mirrors that are these walls, not seeing the outside world, believing that this is the entire world. There is then the self that is the self within each of us, that is the healer self. The one who holds the doorway open. As we stand in the doorway, we are the doorway. Our capacity to stretch across dimensions, our multidimensional nature that is simply who and what we are, recognizes itself as that and makes the most creative move to experience self as doorway, as portal, as bridge. As the one who rips the veils and holds them open, holds the curtains open between the stage and backstage. In this way, we're the tunnel for everything, for true self to enter into limited self, for greatest love expanse to enter into the aspects of self that have been needing it, that had forgotten, that had been seeking it in those reflections, in those mirrors, in the walls where it would never come from. In those repeated stories, attempting to get from the outside, but from an outside that's limited, a limited projection construction. We allow ourselves to be healers, not just for ourselves, but for others we care for and for society at large. Imagine now that this is not a small room and you are the only one in it, but instead imagine that it is a large room, perhaps the size of a gymnasium, and there were so many of us in there. And all of the walls and floors and ceiling are mirrors. And we are all interacting with each other in this infinite soccer game or football game or some kind of competition. It's getting pretty stuffy in there. We're repeating cycles we've already been in. The role of victim and perpetrator always needs to be filled, and someone signs up for it every time. We tend to take turns. Now imagine that along the walls, the ceiling, the floor, everywhere of this large space that we're within, every segment is also a doorway. Every meter of every surface area within of those walls is a door that each of us is capable of opening. And when I stand, when you stand in your doorway, when I stand in my doorway, or you stand in your doorway, we are opening up the sunlight, the oxygen, whatever metaphor you want to call true self, true love, greater coherence, and allowing it to enter the space. And of course, the more we do this, the more others are looking at us and remembering that they can do it too. So I mentioned in this metaphor, there are 3 selves in this metaphor. There's the self that's in the room, the self holding open the door, the self that's been outside the whole time. Be now the self that has been outside the whole time. And this room, where inside is all mirrors, it's one of those double-sided mirror windows where from the outside, it's a window. From the inside, it looks like a mirror. From the outside, we have been observing what's in there the entire time. Be the one outside. You see the whole thing. You see right now the you that's all the way inside the room, inside the story, experiencing that game that is sometimes a confusing, violent game, that's sometimes a very pleasurable game. What's it like for us to acknowledge, for the sake of this metaphor, that we have these 3 selves that are simultaneously existing? So we're going to add one more variable. Which one is boss? Imagine that all of these selves are all facing the same direction. So they're standing in a line. The one at the way front is inside of this mirror room, facing away. The one at the doorway is looking at their back. And the one who's all the way outside is looking at the back of the one in the doorway. The one in the room does not see the other 2. maybe might feel or remember, have a trust or a faith in the fact that there might be someone at the door. Maybe there's been a past experience that can be called upon, a memory that reminds that self, yes, I do believe that there is a doorway that could be opened right now, even though it's not directly seen. Now, the self at the doorway is holding everything open. Maybe it doesn't even see what is coming through, but feels the wind, feels the sunshine, is warmed, feels the expansion, even without greater perception of everything that's behind them. Now the self that's all the way outside sees everything. So which one do we give the flashlight to, or the microphone to? Let's say that as self is concurrently existing in all of these locations, and of course this is a metaphor of three, although there are infinite. Let's say that our greatest creative capacity, the greatest gift that we have been given with free will, is where to place our attention, which eyes to consciously see from. So, which set of eyes are we choosing in any given moment? We get to choose. And of course, the more we do one of them, the more habitual it becomes. So, when our view is as far back as we can get, what does our behavior in the room then look like? Because there's a self that's still there, that's still locally manifest in that particular environment. Of course, that environment might immediately shift because the perception of it has just shifted if the eyes we are looking through are the eyes of the one that's all the way outside. How does the self that is existing in physical way, that's manifesting physical behaviors and relational interactions, what is that self choosing now based on this new view? Going back to the idea of the soccer game or the football game, imagining this as a very big room. How are you playing the game now? Are you breaking the rules and getting a red card? Are you stopping trying to steal the ball and just hugging your opponent? Are you breaking the rules, playing by the rules, or creating new rules? Because the paradigm, the rule set within the room of mirrors upon mirrors is a very different one from the paradigm or rule set of the self that's all the way outside this whole thing. When we're working with a limited amount of variables and a limited view, we are automatically going to create a pattern that has less coherence than if we had greater possibility. So what happens when we come from a view, from a capacity to bring in greater coherence? The possibility of what patterns, what behaviors, what outcomes we express as individuals and as a collective increases past limit. And then those within the game say, "Why did you just hug your opponent?" And we point to the open doorway. "What's that? You have one too." And then maybe they go searching for their door. So for a moment, we take our attention out of the room, through the open doorway, and into the self that's all the way outside. Imagine you're standing in this great field, and in front of you is that room. You see it from the outside, you see it as this bubble. And you see all the way into it, because from your end it's made of windows. So this is the lifetime that you're currently in. So now imagine that you're standing in this great field, and the room that you're looking at is maybe 100 feet in front of you. And then you look to your left, and 100 feet to your left is another room with another open door and another you in there. And you look to the right, and 100 feet out to your right is another room with another you in there. You look above. There's another room hovering above you, this bubble that you can see within, and you're watching yourself in another room in there. Behind you, there's another room, and you see another self. You look below you. This field that you're standing in is actually an empty ground, like you're in outer space, and you're stable. You look below you, and there's another room 100 feet below you, and you see another self. And then you keep looking around in every direction. Another room, another room, another room, another room, another room, filling up all of the gaps. There's no empty space anymore. And you realize that you are looking at all of your lives, and that what's called past lives is actually simultaneous lives, and you're watching all of them at once. And in each room, the self that is mirroring itself within its own walls is seeing a totally different landscape, is experiencing a totally different identity. And some of the players, because there are others in that room playing all of these different kinds of games, you recognize that some of the players are also in multiple rooms. And you look into what are these games? Each of them is slightly different. The rule set, the paradigm that's being followed is slightly different, so that there's a different set of variables to work with, different challenges, different triggers, which will remind those within it that there is a door that they might open. And you start to notice that the rooms where the self has remembered to open the door and is standing in the doorway, there's actually a way that they can glimpse another open doorway across the way. Just a glimpse. And there's a remembrance, there's a recognition, there's a feeling, there's a memory of something that's actually simultaneously happening. So which one of these infinite selves is you? And where is choice? Who is acting? Who is seeing? Who is choosing? Who is noticing what? Where is their conscious awareness? And where is each of those selves only focused within their own world? Who is seeing the most? And at some point, you realize that you are in infinite expressions. And you look into one room and you realize that the self, the protagonist that you are in that room, is the opponent that you were playing in the game in the other room over there. So as you look into each room, you realize that all of the other players that the current protagonist self is interacting with are the you that you're seeing yourself experiencing as a protagonist in different rooms that you can find in different places. So from this multiplicity, the more infinite we get, the more oneness. And as we see this entire fullness of existence, scene upon scene upon scene, story, 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 world, 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 self, 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 pattern, 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 matrix, matrix, game, rule set, game, behavior, outcome, game, iteration, seeing, not seeing. This absolute multiplicity of experience. What happens when the priority is no longer the priority of winning any of the games or even surviving any of the games? Then what? What's desired now? What's left? When every action is possible, what creative act is desired now? What creative act is relevant to this everythingness? Before, in limited self, in limited context, we act based on the narrative of that relevant context. What happens when we open our context? What's relevant now? So, as the self, in the center of it all, watching all of these simultaneous expressions, watching all of these bubbles all around us and all of these worlds, selves, things happening, like we're in some huge command center and we're watching everything on all these TV screens, live streaming all at the same time. We notice that within each bubble, when something happens that is an exact tone, an exact frequency, an exact expression, a color, whatever you want to call this particular flavor, this particular perception, this particular expression of being, when that happens, spark. There's a spark, there's an illumination that sets off that same illumination in every other room. There's a resonance. When there's a realization, when there's an expression, when there's a feeling, when there's a desire. Very specific. That tone will then resonate out, automatically lighting up that tone everywhere else where it's simultaneously existing. And when action is taken there, when that tone is dealt with in a particular way, that outcome will resonate and will slightly alter every other location that it's connected to. In this way, we are writing not only our individual lives within each space, but we are co-writing all of our lives as we are infinitely affecting each other being our other selves. What happens to the expression of love? The expression that creates all other expressions. The creative capacity with no limit. The seeing beyond all limits of seeing. The coherence that creates any kind of creative expression. The openness that knocks down barriers. The warmth that melts that which was previously solid. The coherence that breaks through any limitation. The spark that is recognized everywhere. The one shared spark. The one shared essence that everything came from. The one universal code, language that can be heard across all languages. The one great opener of self-recognition, where everything simultaneously illuminated. Where through this shared network of light, this radio station that every other radio station is simultaneously attuned to, because it created all the others. It can broadcast a message of remembrance, of I am. And every single self hears this one note of one great self. This remembrance of this one body in infinite expressions. And in that moment, it is no longer a collection of individuals, but an infinite array of expressions. Of one continuous beingness. And so we simply choose, as the self that is all selves, to place our capacity of perception and creatorship in the center, in the aspect of ourselves that views all narratives and is locked and limited by none of them. That sees everything That through this seeing, through this love, through this infinity of potential and of love of expression and love of life in all of its forms, sends out these waves of self-recognition of I love you, I love you, I love you. And in that moment, each individual self in each of those infinite numbers of rooms feels something. Something. We find now the room we wish to enter. That we wish to create within. And we keep the doors open. And while the self inside the room is acting, we choose which self we are seeing from. We keep the doorway open. So that we are completely free. And so that what we bring in to the relevance of each moment, to the play being acted out on this stage, to the game being played, whether pleasurable or painful in that moment, we keep the doorway open. And what we bring is from the outside in, from beyond the story. We act within the story from the seeing that is outside of the story, from the heart that is the open doorway. And as the light, as the embodiment of the light, as the receiver of the light, and as the transmitter of the light that we all are.